Hey everybody, I'm Elysia Buss, host of Horsepower Empowerment Through Connection, and today I have the great privilege of getting to interview Elizabeth McCorvey, who is located in Asheville, North Carolina. She's originally from Kentucky, which is, like the horse capital of the world. And yeah, they wear big, crazy, funny hats at the Kentucky Derby. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that, but if you haven't, you should probably check it out on YouTube because man, oh man, do they get creative with those hats. Elizabeth has done so many incredible things. She wears, speaking of hats, she wears so many hats. She works in the gala model, working with horses as a licensed social worker. She is a violinist. She has like her own band, Liz and Elizabeth. She does anti-racism consulting. She has been on with Shannon at Horse Sense of the Carolinas for a webinar getting to talk about white fragility and racism at hand and how that has integrated into the horse world. She just, oh my goodness gracious, this young woman she's just like this powerhouse of an awesome human being. So we are going to get to talk about so many things. We're just going to all over the place today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching today. Elizabeth, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
You're very welcome. So you started working with horses at a very young age, right? At age 10? Mm-hmm. How did that come to be? Like, did your parents buy you a pony when you were 10? Or like, what happened there?
Yeah, I was really lucky. I'm from Lexington, Kentucky, which is the horse capital of the world, so Florida likes to say that it is the horse capital of the world. So if you meet someone from Florida, if there's someone from Florida watching, they like to make the distinction that Lexington is the thoroughbred capital of the world and they are the horse. But,
interesting. Like, tomato, like, exactly. Whatever.
Yeah. So, being that I grew up in the horse/thoroughbred capital of the world, one of the programs that was offered at the YMCA for summer camps was horseback riding camp.
Awesome.
And so my mom, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. My mom was like first in line of all of the camps. Like when summer rolled around, she was like, "Get these kids out of my house." So I got to do all sorts of, I know how to play tennis. I know how to like swim. I know how to do all these things, and I know how to ride horses. Awesome. And so I was able to go to a summer camp for 2 or 3 summers in a row, and then my mom finally saw how horse crazy I was, like not just in the summer, and so right. She found a barn that I could ride at regularly. And then and so like many horse girls, I found a horse girl community, and what my mom would drop me off like as early as I could get her to drop me off, which I like if she would drop me off at 6 in the morning, I'd have been there.
She's like, "Dawn, let's go."
The crickets. Yeah, exactly. And she'd pick me up at 6 at night, and so I did that probably until I was like 17 or 18, just like being out in the barn.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And I got my first horse when I was 12. Although I was leasing him I was riding for a while, then leasing him for a while, and then his owner went to college and she gave him to me.
Aww. And what was his name?
Dapper Dan.
Dapper Dan. That seems very Kentucky.
Yeah. It's so funny.
What was he?
It is. Yeah. Well, his name is Dapper. I called him Dapper Dan. Actually, it's so funny. My mom just sent me a picture of me. This is the last time I rode him.
Sweetheart.
Yeah. Actually, I kept him. So I had him for like 12 years, and we just put him down last year.
Oh wow! So I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. He was with me for a long time. He's my buddy for a while.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And did you get any more horses after that, or?
Yeah, I did. I got another one when I was 17. I thought that after riding Dapper, who was a saint, I thought that I was a good rider and that I could train any horse, as you think when you are 17.
Yes. That's the way that works.
So I got an off-the-track thoroughbred named PC, and we fought each other for 4 years, and then I sold him to someone who's
connected
differently with him. Yeah. Yeah. And then I got another horse. My current horse, his name is Tresca.
Name.
Yeah, it's like Fresca with a T. And we
Now I want
used
a
to,
Fresca. God.
I get that a lot.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Go on.
No, that's okay. And so he's the horse I use for the equine assisted psychotherapy. He let me know with his heaves and his arthritis that he was not going to event. Not going to event anymore. He's not going to prance around the dressage arena anymore. He's not going to jump any cross country jumps anymore. So now he is a therapy horse.
Makes sense. It's very kind of you to honor what he was telling you.
Well, I went kicking and screaming. I was like, okay, so we can do private talks, we can do
Are you sure?
Yeah. And he was like, hell no, not doing this anymore.
Done. So what brought you to the EGALA model specifically?
When I was in grad school, I was able to find an internship or a practicum at a facility that does equine assisted psychotherapy. They're in Maryville, Tennessee, and they're called Main Support. Kim Henry is the founder of that. And I was able to work with her and my social work supervisor there. And I really just felt, I was like, oh my gosh, horses and therapy, this, like, they can go together. That's amazing.
You're like, best day of my life, just having that epiphany.
Yeah. I didn't even really know that was a thing until I think I was talking to my, I think I went into grad school and my practicum supervisor was like, you know, you have to fill out a sheet of, like, an informational sheet of interest. And she was like, oh, do you want to do equine therapy? And I was like, what?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was able to get certified and that was in 2014. And so I was able to get certified while I was a student, which is great, because of the student rate, which is great.
Yeah, it definitely makes a difference. It is not a cheap model to get into.
No, it is not. Yeah, so that's how I kind of got into it.
Oh, that's cool. And then how did you connect with Shannon Knapp at Horse Sense of the Carolinas?
Yeah, so actually, when I moved here to Asheville, one of the first things I looked up was like, where are the horses? Where's the community?
Yeah.
And Shannon, I believe I know she still does this when there's not a communicable disease going around. Yeah. She has kind of these learning days where people can come to the farm and learn about how they use horses or how they work with horses to heal folks. And so I went out there just to see how they did things. And that's the first time I met her. And since then we've been able to work together. I've been invited out to observe some of their groups, and I've been able to lead some anti-racism training over there. And I've been able to be on some phone calls with her. She's doing some connect calls for her Trailblazers where she talks to all sorts of really awesome people about all the work they're doing. So I've been able to be on one of those calls with her. So it's been great. She's so much fun to work with.
Fantastic. Yeah, I have, I imagine it helps you to expand your range because the people that get on Shannon's calls are like global leaders in our field. And I mean, that's the first time I got to see Elizabeth, and she was just incredibly well spoken, and it was so cool to get to see that just experience. And it's always interesting when you have that conversation come up in the equine field, because the equine field, for equine therapy and learning, and I think just like the equine industry in general is like a pretty like white bread sort of industry. Like we don't have a lot of diversity in our field. So that's why it was so great to get to have Elizabeth on that call, and why I also am really grateful to get to have her here today so she can talk a little bit more about her experience, in the industry. So Elizabeth, like what has that experience been like? Have you experienced racism in the industry, from the time when you were a kid, like first coming into it and just getting to be a horse girl and like loving being in the barn, to actually like working in the industry as a social worker?
Yes. Constantly. It's you're right that the field is very white, and there's not a lot of opportunity for Black and brown people to have upward mobility in any industry, really, because of the systemic racism that exists. And it's really hard for us to get into a field and a sport. I'm thinking about horse sports in particular, very elitist. Like, it costs a lot of money to
especially in the upper levels. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it costs a lot of money for me to be able to do equine therapy, equine assisted psychotherapy. I have to have a lot of money invested. I have to have horses. And
horses are an expensive endeavor. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and for populations of Black and brown folks that are a lot of the time concentrated in cities, like, the barn is not on the bus line, so it's hard to get out there. And then when you don't see anybody in that world that looks like you, that's a natural deterrent in itself.
Yeah. So, like, what are some of the experiences that you've had specifically in regards to, like, racism in the field, if you don't mind sharing?
I'm chewing on that question, because that's a pretty intimate question.
It is. It's totally okay for you to not to ask. I mean, not to answer.
Yeah.
I always like to honor everybody's space, you know, like, because in life, I have a general policy, like, across the board for subject matter, is that it's always okay to ask as long as you're completely okay with the answer of no.
Totally.
And people having healthy boundaries. Like, I never get mad at people for telling me no. So it's just a really great practice, and just being like, no, like, thanks for asking, but I'm not interested in sharing that, piece of myself. Okay.
Sure. Well, before I go into, because I've got lots of examples, before I go into a story, can I give you some feedback?
Oh, for sure. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So earlier in the call, you told me that I was well-spoken, which I don't know if you know that that's a pretty common microaggression against Black and brown people because the assumption is that I am not going to be articulate and that I'm not going to be able to share my experience in a way that is palpable for people, and that I'm not going to use, appropriate, grammatically correct language. So it doesn't feel good to be told that I am articulate or well-spoken, because the expectation for so many people that look like me is that I'm not going to be articulate.
Oh, thank you for giving me that feedback. No,
Yeah.
I love it when some people that come on, they just have a natural feel to them that, like, some people, regardless of color or gender or, like, cultural identification, just have that experience. And so I really appreciate that feedback so that I can be more mindful in the future.
Yeah. Thank you for hearing that.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful thing. Like, part of the reason we do the interviews is that so we can have greater awareness of how we engage with people in general, because we don't know what we don't know. And so creating a safe space where we can have those kinds of, like, conversations, and, like, having that assuming positive intent is, like, how when I went to college, one of my instructors, he always told us to, like, assume positive intent when we engage with people. And perhaps that's very different from me being white and assuming that, than you being a person of color, because of your personal, like, life experiences or somebody else's, right? And so for me, part of how I manage my mindset and my experiences with others when I'm struggling with them is assuming positive intent, because most times I found is that when people come off in a certain way, it's because they're coming from a place of either confusion or pain from trauma or something like that, that most people aren't actually trying to have malintents, but things come off a certain way, which is why I think that communication between two people to clear confusions of intention is so incredibly important, and why I'm so grateful that you took the moment to talk to me about that, so I could gain increased awareness of how that could be perceived, so I could be more mindful in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that intention conversation is interesting, because one of the things I teach in anti-racism is that racism is not about intent, it's about impact. And so the what you meant by it, not you Elysia, but what someone meant by
the general you.
Sure, yeah. But what someone meant by a microaggressive comment is kind of irrelevant, because of the way that it was received and the way that it was felt and the way that it impacted the person the person who experienced the comment. So it's an interesting and nuanced thing, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous amount of nuances for like what you're bringing up, like because the like you saying about it being a microaggression and whatnot, and it's a different kind of way to flip things around in a person's brain when you're not accustomed to having to go into a place of such nuances with your communication and engagement with people.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I was at a training last year and there were probably, it was a natural lifemanship training. And there were probably somewhere between 20 and 30 of us in a room when you could have 20 or 30 people in a room.
Right. Way back in the day before.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I was the only brown person there. And then after everybody introduced themselves, their introductions, and there was a break, and a woman came up to me and told me like, wow, you were just so articulate. Thank you for sharing, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, inside, that makes me feel like, ugh, like, yuck,
Interesting.
yuck. Like, I'm not any smarter than anybody around me. I don't speak any differently than anybody around me, certainly not in that room. But why did you have to tell me that? What was the purpose of telling me that when you didn't tell anybody else that? And it doesn't feel good. And even as I'm sharing that story, I'm feeling that yucky, tingly,
Yeah.
shamey feeling that comes up when someone makes a comment like that. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of history attached to
Yeah.
us. And I appreciate what you said about you don't know what you don't know. And when you know better, you do better.
Or at least certainly try to, because it's about like building habit life, because you don't just get to snap your fingers and suddenly be perfect at everything that you're attempting in any subject matter in life,
Mm-hmm.
but having that grace and compassion and working towards trying to do a better job and being consistent and doing our best to surround ourselves with people that we can have that kind of dialogue with, right? And doing our best on both sides to be able to have create that safe, non-judgmental container. But that's just about building respect and rapport for human beings in general. I think, which is a practice that most people, I feel like on the planet need to work on, as many of us struggle with our emotional regulation with the level of uncertainty and fear that's going on. And there's a lot of really big changes, and most people don't do great with just in general.
Absolutely. Changes don't feel good. Our brains don't like it. And just to comment on something you were saying just now about that creating safety in both sides, I've been stepping away from the word safe, because in an interaction between two people, there's always going to be a power dynamic at play. And certainly in our dynamic, this is your production and you are a white or white passing person. You've got all the questions. So you've got a lot of power in our dynamic. And so I get to decide if it feels safe or not. But you might be able to create a safer experience. Or what I've been saying is that maybe it could be a brave experience for both of us to be able to try things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to your original question.
Yes, back to my original question.
Yeah. The example that popped up for me was, and this happens in my gala work, and so I used to do some eventing, like super low level eventing.
Yeah.
And
wait, hold on for a second. For people who don't know what eventing is, can you just briefly dive into that?
Yeah, totally. So the simplest way I've heard to describe it, somebody said this to me, was that it's like the triathlon of horse sports. So there are two phases of jumping, one in a field, just galloping at fallen logs and stuff, and one in an arena where you're jumping poles. And then one phase of dressage, which is essentially doing a pattern in front of a judge and they tell you how much you sucked. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, so I used to do that. And so something I encounter in every space I go with my horse is, oh, is that your horse? Oh, I didn't expect you to drive that F-150, which is what I drive. Or like, oh, is that your trailer? Like, oh, are you leasing? Like, who did you borrow that trailer from? But it's like, no, that is my horse. That is my truck. That is my trailer. And for people to question that feels like a slight to me, because they don't question the other people, some of whom, because, you know, eventers especially, like horse people, we're dirty sometimes. We like look really gross, and some people look raggedier than I do, and nobody asks them about whose horse belonged to them, or if their stuff belonged to them. But I get that question. Or when I have to be careful when I'm hauling on property, and I don't want to go after dark, because then it's that much more suspicious for me to be walking around with my own horse in the dark. So there's a lot of little things that happen that add up to big things and are a symptom of the larger problem, which is that people don't expect people that look like me to be in a place like that. So that overarching umbrella of like, you are not welcome here. We don't expect you to be here, and it's confusing for us that you're here, and you're not welcome.
I'm really sorry you've had to experience that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Like, it's not right.
Yeah, it's tough, and it's not unexpected. I mean, I got the message like every other Black or brown kid in America, which is that you're gonna have to work twice as hard to get half as much, which means there are tons and tons and tons and tons of little Black riders out there that are a lot better than the talent that's out there, but don't have the opportunity. Yeah. One thing I find in the horse world is that, because talking about race is uncomfortable, because it's mostly a white space, people find it easier to say like, oh, well, it's a class issue. It's an issue of class and money. And it's not just poor brown kids, it's poor white kids too that also experience this, which is a conversation. There's definitely a conversation to be had about classism in the equine world. And we also know that the intersection of race and class is like very, very, very defined. So I say, yes, we can talk about classism, and to talk about classism, we also have to talk about racism.
Yeah.
There's
so much to learn.
Yeah.
You know, it's really interesting for me to think about all of the things as a white person, because like I've also like, I'm a really just like open, gregarious person. Like I do my best in my conscious awareness to treat everybody with kindness and equality and equity and all of those pieces. But we've seen even in this conversation that like I did something that made Elizabeth not feel great, even with like the best intentions. And like without thinking, like, because what I said was like with positive intention, because understanding like I go to college, like I've been to college, I have a certain expectation, like, and she has a master's degree, and I'm like, I have an appreciation for human beings who can articulate things well. And I laugh at myself because I don't necessarily even always feel like I articulate things as well as I should, especially since I've had a head injury. So I have an extra appreciation for any person who articulates something well. And so that's some of my story that feeds into that like conversation piece of being like, that's really great, that I would literally say to any person because of my own personal story. And then like thinking back about how that conversation was, and being like, oh, and look how it seemed like I was backpedaling to justify it, because in that moment of discomfort, I didn't know how to say to you what I just said to you, to give more of a backstory, because it is an uncomfortable thing, especially when you're not malintended and you're just like, shit. That wasn't comfortable for anybody. Like, I'm not over here feeling comfortable about it. But despite the discomfort, it's still an incredibly important conversation, which is why we're here today. And so just having transparency and like vulnerability about like that whole process it's so important. Like, it's just a necessary piece of the puzzle that like, there are going to be uncomfortable moments. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. It's fine to be uncomfortable, because growth is what's on the other side of discomfort.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And discomfort means you're trying something new.
Yeah, exactly. So, Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm so grateful. One of the interviews I get to do pretty soon is this young lady who is working towards the Olympics. That's a nice young lady of color. And she's been working so hard. And I'm so excited for her sweet little heart that she's like on that journey and she gets to represent it sounds like on an Olympic level. So as a jumper, yeah, it's super exciting.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a lot of stuff. Elizabeth, there's so many things that we get to talk about here. How do you like what would be some steps that you feel like would be great for people to take or be more aware of as they interact within our industry, like in life in general, but specifically our industry?
In regards specifically to
with the horses. Yeah, and the horses. And I'm sorry, I didn't articulate that well. Let me take a moment. So in regards to what you were just discussing with like the little like microsites that people are giving you and like how they looked at it a different way and you not feeling comfortable, what would be things for people to be more aware of as they engage with people of color, or from an outsider perspective, if somebody comes up upon a conversation that's occurring, that they can help to empower somebody and not add to the problem, even though they're well intended? Does that make sense?
Yes. And it sounds like two different questions.
It is two different questions, but I was just like, I'm fumbling my way through this.
Yeah, that's okay. So for your first question, which sounds like what can people do in our horse world in regard to anti-racism?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's coming up for me now is just like asking questions. So I know that because white is the quote unquote norm, like when you go to an event or you go to a conference for your whatever equine assisted psychotherapy realm you're in, and it's all white men, ask questions about that, and don't stop asking questions until leadership hears you. Because if you are surrounded, if you know the global makeup, the makeup of the US, and you're in a space with that many people and it doesn't reflect that, that should make you uncomfortable. It should be uncomfortable to be surrounded 100% by people who look like you. And that doesn't just end with race. I mean, how many trans-identified people are in your organization? How many people in wheelchairs are there? How many people who have different invisible disabilities are there? How many men are there?
There aren't a lot of men in our industry either. They're also like a minority in our field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, and then that's an interesting question. How many men are there who are practitioners and clinicians, and then how many men are there in leadership? Because sometimes there's a disparity there too. So asking questions and asking for answers to those questions, and requesting more training, because there are a lot of us out there, a lot of people of color, I'm thinking specifically of Veronica.
Veronica's amazing. I love her. She gets to be on, I'm interviewing her, I think, next week. So
yeah, awesome. Good. And so we're out there and we're educating, and we are willing to put ourselves out there and educate about things that are traumatizing to us, and how we walk into the world. But we are willing to put ourselves out there and share that piece with you. So
and it's not that.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
It's not that the information isn't out there. It's not that the learning isn't out there. Your organization might just not be accessing it. And that is something you should question, because if an organization can dismiss that, which is such an important thing, then it's going to be really hard for you to be equipped to work with clients who have all these intersections, because your organization may have not prepared you. No matter how much work you feel like is happening in that world, if it's not addressing all of these minoritized populations and helping you work with them within that model in the best way, it's not doing good work, and it might not be an effective model with the population you're serving.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. And we serve a lot of different populations across the globe in regards to equine assisted learning and therapy. And people come out of that and they feel better. Like their trauma has gotten, to a point that they've healed themselves. They've been able to find different mechanisms that help them with whatever like learning disabilities that they have, so they're able to be successful in life. Like, there's so many different things, but people transcend those experiences and they oftentimes love the horses, but then they don't usually turn and like come back into the field. I mean, unless they're veterans. I feel like sometimes veterans come back and they volunteer or they do something, and that's probably a higher percentage. I feel like there, but also we help people get to those different places. But the next level, I think, is helping people to reach for their dreams, right? It's not just about becoming functional. It's about reaching for what you truly want in your life and live and being like your most authentic self. And for some people that might be wanting to do the work, and how do we support those people in that conversation?
That's a good question. I think so much of it requires addressing the issues that already exist in these organizations. So if you want that client, if that client like loves working with the horses and really finds passion in it, but then have no access points, there's no ladder to climb to get there.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about how, so I'm lucky enough to have been able to have the resources to get my master's degree. But for so many of these people who have been marginalized by our society, like that is not an accessible dream. So it might not just start with like, okay, how do I get you to be a therapist? It might be like, how do I get you out of your neighborhood? How do I get you to class when the bus no longer runs in your area and the quality of education is poor because the taxes that go to pay for that education, because of the redlining, because of the gentrification, because of there's just so much.
There's so much. There is.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different pieces to it.
Mm-hmm. But I think it does start with organizations addressing the blind spots in themselves. And I don't just mean equine assisted psychotherapy. I mean social work. I mean psychology.
All of them. Yeah, no,
yeah,
absolutely.
All of them, because if we've got these organizations that want to open their doors to all of these different diverse populations, but then can't sustain that membership because of the blind spots that they have and the harm that they're doing in their organization, that's not going to solve anything. It's not enough to just have Black and brown bodies in the room.
No, absolutely. I mean, I went to college for 10 years. I've been to like 10 different colleges, and I saw very little diversity in any of those.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just crazy.
Mm-hmm. It's by design. It was intended to be that way, and so it is.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So like after my head injury, like I went back to school, and I went back to school because I needed that support. Right. And it was a big jump to even attempt to go back to school after my head injury and be like, well, I can't work. So I'm like trying to get financial aid to go back to school. And a lot of people just don't even know that that's something that's available to do. And there's just a lot of different layers. And that's why awareness is so important, and having like great groups of people that know the ins and outs to provide support to different people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you play, I'm curious for your violin, like, how does that feed your soul? Like, when did you start playing the violin? And like, do you ever integrate that into sessions?
I do not ever integrate into sessions, although I have a lot of friends who are into music therapy, and that's another wonderful experiential somatic modality that I think is super effective. So I've been playing the violin since I was 4 or 5, and I played through high school, and then I took a break, and then when I moved to Asheville, it's very like hippie woo woo here, so everyone's like,
it's
bring
very
your
hippie woo
instrument.
in Asheville.
Yeah.
I do remember that from living there when I was teaching.
Yeah. So everyone wants to jam. Everyone wants.
They're like, really funny about it out there.
Yeah, and so I was classically trained, and so I was like, ew, like if Mozart didn't write it, I don't want to do it. But then I found I had a friend who was like, well, let's just play around, and it turns out I'm really good at jamming. And so I met my current music partner through a mutual friend, and she and I have been playing together for 3 years, and we've got someone defined us, which I love this, we are folk with a pop twist.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
It is fun. It's one of my favorite things that I do. So we do some originals. We do a lot of covers. Anytime there's a 90s like R&B song that we can like turn into a little folky and we make it happen.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
love that. I love how you can just see how you just like light up. You just light up when you talk about your music. Like that's a beautiful thing. I have
Yeah.
I have so much respect for you having the ability to jam, because I played the flute when I was younger and I like suck at playing by ear. I'm so bad at it. I'm so bad at it. And like I was really great at like playing off sheet music. Like I was first chair, like we did after school stuff, like amazing experiences. But man, if you asked me to jam with somebody, I'd just be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So just like that's really cool. I always wanted to be able to do that, but I know.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I think so. I started playing really young. So both of my parents are opera singers. So
Oh
music was
wow,
like, yeah, music was like in everything we did all the time. I've probably seen like 100 operas, and so it makes a lot of sense. Music makes a lot of. It's a language that makes a lot of sense to me. So I had that advantage.
that's really cool. So we have this like random little link between you and I. So my grandma's sister was a professional opera singer.
No way.
Yeah,
That's
like
awesome.
I never met her, but my dad would tell me stories, and I was just like, what? Like, it was just seems so odd. To, like, my dad, God bless his soul, like cannot really. He struggles to carry a tune. So to think that his like aunt was like this famous opera singer or whatever was just kind of like that's really funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's such an interesting thing. So can you tell me, like, let's flip back to the horses for a minute. So the work that you do, since we're trying to increase visibility for the equine therapy field, can you talk to us a little bit about the different populations that you've worked with the horses, and like a couple of profound stories, like the changes that you've seen in people?
Yeah. So the population that I work with is I work with people that are othered in some way or marginalized in some way. So that's people of color, um, LGBTQ plus, LGBTQIA identified, trans identified folks, people who are marginalized in some way in society. That's really the population I enjoy working with most.
Yeah.
And what was your other question?
How you work with them with the horses?
Yes.
Like, what would
Yeah.
an activity with the horses and your clients look like?
Yeah, so I'm finding that one of the things I enjoy the most is helping people rework the way that they show up in relationships,
Uh-huh.
um, and how they can change the nature of the way that they can change the nature of a relationship by shifting the way that they show up in that relationship. And so I've been finding that one of my favorite things is helping develop relationship between people and horses, and watching people's self-esteem. That's been something that's come out of every single session I have, which is probably true of most folks. But I don't find that there's anxiety and there's depression and OCD and all those things. But when I look at the work that I do my best with horses, it's helping people increase their own sense of self-worth and self-esteem and self-efficacy and being able to solve their own problems.
Beautiful.
Because I've been working very hard to decolonize my own therapy in the therapy office, which means stepping away from white supremacy ideals, which value homogeny and they value sameness, they value doing things this way and fitting in this box. And when a client says to me like, oh, well, can I try it this way? I'm like, hell yeah, try it.
You're
that
like,
way.
sounds great. So let's do that
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. If the answer to like, what makes you do it that way is because we've always done it that way. That's like my favorite little inroad, because like we don't have to do things the same way just because it's not a nebulous force. It's like a very specific set of like social media and indoctrination and culture and norms and values, which are very Western and very binary. But we don't have to do things in that specific way. And I love watching people try new, crazy, offbeat, wild ways of doing things, and then hearing the stories about how that's translated into their life outside of the barn. So it's my favorite thing.
That's awesome. I love that, and like painting that picture. And I especially appreciate it because I've never fit in the box. Like I've struggled with that my whole life. People trying to put me in a box, and me sometimes trying to fit in the box just to like fit in and have things be easier, and it just like never working out. And so I'm just like, yes, thank you for doing that. Life is not about boxes. Don't check them. Just be yourself and rock at it. Just be you, and just right away.
Yeah.
It's gonna be all right. There is a place for every single person on this planet to get to be themselves.
I hope so. It's tough. The people that I work with, often like it's not safe for them to be who they are.
Yeah.
And so just being able to navigate and heal their trauma in a world that will continue to traumatize them as soon as they drive away from the barn. And so at least in my little pocket, there is 100% always going to be a place for them no matter what. And I think that there is healing in that.
Absolutely. I would definitely agree with that. And like on behalf of all the people you get to, serve, thank you for providing that space for humans on the planet.
Thanks. I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So, would you say at this point in your life that you are living your dream? Are you still reaching and exploring? Because you're still like relatively young, right?
Yeah, I'm 28, I think. I'm 28.
Yeah. Which is so cool that you're doing as much as you are at that age. I'm just like, man, I still had so much growth. I mean, I'm still growing. I'm like 40, but it's just, it's really cool.
Am I living my dream? Oh, goodness. I think my dream is always evolving. I have at least 5 jobs right now, and it's because I can't say no. It's not, but not in a, well, I'm sure I'm working on that in some ways, but like it's because I love so many things and I'm energized by so many things. I feel like I'm always learning about something that's happening that's like, yes, I want to put my hand in that. Like, yes, I want to do that. Yes, I want to do that. Do you want to be on this committee, Elizabeth? Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And are you sleeping? I have no idea. Give me some more.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like my dream is just like constantly evolving. Like I didn't even know that one of my dreams would be to lead anti-racism workshops for white therapists. And I freaking love it. And I want to do it all the time. And I've only been doing it for a year and a half. And if you'd asked me 5 years ago if that's what I wanted to do, or if that was part of my plan, I would have said absolutely not. But it turns out I'm really good at talking to white people about race, and I want to do it more. And so that's like a new part of my dream that I'm shaping right now. And I really love it. So the answer is yes, and.
Yes, and. I feel like that's always a really good place to be in life, to yes, and. I'm happy where I am, and I'm open to all the other beautiful things that the universe can provide me.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then you get to be an inspiration for so many other people.
I hope so.
People watching this video later on today or tomorrow or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, and that's great. And in the descriptions, we'll have ways that you can contact Elizabeth if you have more questions for her. If you want to schedule a workshop with her, have her like schedule her for a speaking engagement or anything else to increase awareness. So many different opportunities. Or if you want to book a really awesome band, I mean,
well, you haven't heard us yet.
I mean, like, come on, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, that reminds me. I meant to mention that a my co-facilitator and I facilitate a training for white therapists called "Are You Doing It Wrong?" and that's happening on September 11th. It is all virtual because they're not doing any trainings in person right now, and so I'm not sure if it's up yet, but it'll be through Lenore Ryan University. That's LENOIR space RHYNE, or you can find it through a website called A Therapist Like Me, which is a nonprofit that was founded to match minority identified clients with minority identified therapists. My co-facilitator is the one who is the founder of that. So if you want to learn about some of this stuff with me, that's where you can find me next.
And we'll definitely put that in the descriptions so that people can easily follow the link and from putting it up on Facebook and everything else. And before we go, one last thing. Who inspires you in the world?
Wow, I have so many inspiring people.
It can be a long list. It doesn't have to be one.
My mom and my dad.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, who inspires me? Actually, that was kind of joke, but it probably is my dad would be my number one. He always used to say, which was so annoying when I was a teenager, but is not annoying to me now. He always used to say, don't ever let anybody steal your joy. Which, you know, when you're 13, like that is the last thing you want to hear.
For sure. Yeah. Super.
But now I feel like I've shaped so much of my yeses and hell no's around that. Like, is this going to steal my joy or is this going to add to my joy? So that's a big one for me. I definitely got if I have 5 jobs, my dad has like 65. Like he does so many things with joy. And so I got that from him. So I'm intensely inspired by him. I'm trying to think, so I feel like my list changes all of the time. And I feel like depending on the area that I'm in, I get so much, like my horse inspiration, right now my horse inspiration is Mavis Pence, who is a stadium jumper, and she is a Black woman. And then my anti-racism, being a person in the world inspiration right now, is Resmaa Menakem, who wrote My Grandmother's Hands, which is this amazing
I've heard a lot about that book. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know if you wanted a 15-minute answer to that question.
No, by all means. I think it's
now.
great for people to get to have like other people to look towards, in the different, I'm like, yeah, 15 minutes, go. All the inspirational people, like we have time.
Awesome.
I don't know if we can fit it in the 5,000 character thing for description on YouTube, but we'll figure it out.
Okay. Well, then one more. There's a woman who I recently went to a training called What I Wish My Cisgender Therapist Knew. And there was a person there, and I'm going to try to look for her name real quick. She is transgender, and she wrote an article for a newspaper called the Rainbow Times or something, and it was called Ask a Trans Woman. I'm going to try to find her name really quick.
Sure.
But reading about her journey and her vulnerability has been really, really, really inspiring to me. I can't find her name, but I'll send it to you.
Yeah, send it to me. And also for the people out there that don't know what cisgender means, do you want to just let them know really quick before?
Sure. It means that your gender identification matches the gender you were assigned at birth.
There you go. So I feel like there are plenty of people that are still learning about all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Any word or any terms, I always like to ask people, be like, for those that don't know. So you'll send me the name, and yeah, I love that. Your dad and your mom and this Mavis Perkins, is that what you said?
P-E-N-C. Yeah.
Someday it's like names. They don't know.
That's okay.
That's why I have people send me bios, folks, with like recommendations. It's like me remembering all so much. All right. Well, my friend, is there anything else that you would like to share today before we log off?
Not that I can think of. Who are your inspirations?
Who are my inspirations? Oh my goodness gracious. There are so many people that I am inspired by out in the world. I am inspired. I'm like, where to even start? I'm inspired by Mark Rashin and the connection that he has to horses and the calmness that he brings. I'm inspired by Oprah and her magnificent journey, everything that she has built, like where she started from. And I just think that all of that is amazing. I'm inspired by, I would jokingly say my friends that put up with me when I was in my 20s, because that was terrible. Any person that I'm still friends with now, thank you, and I'm inspired by your resilience. I had a lot of growing to do when I was younger. Wow. I am so incredibly grateful for the level of maturity that I have right now. I still get to grow, but dang. Um, I'm inspired by, yeah, it's a funny one to think about. I'm inspired by any human being that is willing to be honest with themselves and to take a look at the things inside of themselves that they struggle with and have a willingness to stand in that space and grow.
Mm,
That's what I'm
nice.
inspired by.
Nice. I like that.
Takes
Thanks
a
for
lot
sharing.
of strength. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Mhm.
I'm just like, oh. It's a lot. It's so important to me to get to try and hold space for people that have the desire to grow.
Mm, yeah. Well, we need so many more people like that, and I'm so glad you're doing the work that you do.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Well, here's to all the people out there, you, me, and everybody else trying to empower as many people as we can. So,
Doing the best.
yeah,
Doing our best.
doing our do hold space and do the things that need to be done and be able to uncomfortably be like, wow, that wasn't as good as I thought I was supposed to do in that, but that's okay because I'm gonna grow and try.
That's right. That's right. Because perfectionism is a trap and it's a tool of white supremacy.
Perfectionism is, I tell people that perfection is like beauty. It is in the eye of the beholder, because what is built by one person to their perfection and their standards within their own brain could be complete trash to another person. And that's why we just stand in our authentic self and what we love, and we're true to ourselves. And whatever anybody else has to say about it is their journey, and
That's right.
has nothing really to do with us
Mm-hmm.
as human beings. All right. Well, this has been a wonderful and occasionally uncomfortable interview, but that's okay.
It's okay.
I'm grateful for the experience of all of it.
Good. I'm glad.
You're an awesome human being. Thank you so much for your time and for being on the show today, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you. You're very welcome. All right, everybody. Until next time. Bye.